They say the legal system is blind, but Megan knew better. It sees money, it sees power. And standing across the aisle, her ex-husband Edward had both. He had taken her home, her confidence, and now he was coming for her dignity. He thought he had won the moment he stepped into that courtroom. He thought she was alone. But he forgot one thing. Kindness leaves a legacy. Just when the judge was about to strike the gavel that would end Megan's life as she knew it, the doors swung open. Edward screamed, but the silence that followed, that was the sound of a billionaire's justice walking in. This is the story of how one woman's past saved her future. The radiator in the corner of the studio apartment hissed, a dying animal sound that seemed to mock the silence of the room. Megan sat on the edge of the mattress, her feet bare against the cold linoleum. It was 5:30 a.m. The sun hadn't yet breached the gray skyline of Chicago, but sleep had abandoned her hours ago. She looked at the dress hanging on the back of the door. It was navy blue, modest, purchased from a thrift store 3 days ago for $12. It was the best she could do. It still smelled faintly of someone else's lavender detergent, a ghost of a life she didn't know. Today, she thought, today it ends. Megan stood up, her knees popping. At 34, she felt 50. The last 2 years of marriage to Edward had aged her in ways that didn't show on a driver's license, but carved deep hollows under her eyes and tightened the tendons in her neck until she lived in a perpetual state of flinch. She walked to the small kitchenette, bypassing the empty fridge to fill a glass with tap water. Her hand trembled. She hated that. She hated that even when he wasn't in the room, Edward was controlling her physiology. "Focus, Megan," she whispered. Her voice sounded rusty. She opened the manila folder on the counter. It contained her defense, a pathetic stack of bank statements showing a meager income from her job as a night shift waitress, a character reference from her landlord, and a handwritten timeline of events that her public defender, Mr. Henderson, had barely glanced at. Edward's lawyers had filed for full liquidation of assets, claiming Megan had been financially irresponsible and parasitic during the marriage. They were asking for her to pay his legal fees. They were painting a picture of a gold digger who had failed to launch, ignoring the fact that Edward had demanded she quit her job as a forensic auditor 5 years ago to support his vision. She had erased herself for him. And now he was suing the eraser. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister, Sarah, who lived 3 states away and had 3 kids she couldn't leave. "Praying for you, Meg. Don't let him get inside your head. You know the truth." The truth. Megan closed her eyes. The truth was a slippery thing in a courtroom. The truth was that Edward was a real estate developer with a smile that could charm a cobra and a temper that could crack drywall. The truth was that he had hidden money in offshore accounts she knew existed but couldn't prove because she no longer had access to the servers. She had tried to tell Mr. Henderson, "Unless you have documents, Mrs. Thorne, it's hearsay," the overworked lawyer had sighed, checking his watch. "Let's focus on minimizing the damages, not chasing ghosts." Megan finished the water and moved to the bathroom. The mirror was cracked in the corner, a reminder of the apartment's previous tenant, or perhaps just a metaphor. She applied mascara with surgical precision, masking the fatigue. She pulled her hair back into a severe bun. She had to look stable. Edward's primary weapon today would be her instability. He would cite her anxiety, her sleeplessness, the time she cried at a dinner party after he whispered that she looked like a cheap whore in front of his investors. He would spin her trauma as madness. She put on the navy dress. It was slightly loose at the waist. She had lost 10 pounds in the last month. She tightened the belt. There was a knock at the door, a sharp, authoritative rap. Megan froze. It was too early for the landlord. She moved to the peephole. Nothing but the empty hallway. She unlocked the deadbolt and opened it a crack. On the floor lay a single white envelope. No postage, no name. She picked it up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Edward loved games. This was probably a last-minute settlement offer, something insulting, or a threat disguised as legal correspondence. She tore it open. Inside was a single index card. It wasn't typed. It was written in the jagged, frantic scrawl she recognized immediately as Edward's handwriting. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Don't speak. Just nod. Megan stared at the card. The fear that usually paralyzed her spiked hot and sudden, turning into something else. Indignation. He wasn't just divorcing her, he was scripting her. Even now, hours before the gavel, he was directing the scene. She crumpled the card in her fist. "No," she said to the empty hallway. She grabbed her coat, her purse, and the pathetic manila folder. She locked the door behind her, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in the quiet building. She was walking into a slaughter. She knew that. She was a gazelle walking into a lion's den, armed with nothing but a moral compass. But she would walk. She wouldn't crawl. Not today. The Cook County Courthouse was a monolith of gray stone and misery. It smelled of wet wool, floor wax, and desperation. Megan navigated the security line, feeling the gaze of the guards. They looked bored. To them, she was just another docket number, another dissolving marriage in a city of millions. She took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was crowded with lawyers in expensive suits and clients in their Sunday best, all murmuring in hushed, urgent tones. Then she saw him. Edward was standing near the water fountain, flanked by his legal team. He looked immaculate. A charcoal bespoke suit, a tie the color of dried blood, hair swept back in that careless way that cost $200 a cut. He was laughing at something his lead counsel, a shark named Marcus Sterling, had said. Edward looked vibrant. While Megan felt she was fading into a gray sketch of herself, Edward was in high definition. He thrived on conflict. It fed him. He turned, his eyes locking onto hers across the corridor. The laughter vanished, replaced by a look of pity that was far more cruel than hatred. He said something to Sterling, patted the lawyer on the shoulder, and walked toward Megan. Megan's instinct was to retreat, to find a wall to put her back against. She forced her feet to stay planted. "Megan," he said, his voice smooth, pitched low so only she could hear. He stopped just inside her personal space. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Edward. Is that the dress you wore to your grandmother's funeral?" He tisked softly, reaching out as if to pick a piece of lint off her shoulder. Megan flinched back. His eyes hardened instantly. "Don't make a scene, Meg. It's pathetic. Look, I told Sterling to offer you the studio apartment deposit. Take it. Walk away. If we go in there, I'm going to have to say things about you. Things that will make it very hard for you to ever get a job in this city again." "You mean lies," Megan said, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. "You're going to tell lies." Edward smiled, a cold lifting of the corners of his mouth. "It's not a lie if the judge believes it. And look at you. You're vibrating. You're a wreck. Who are they going to believe? The successful developer rebuilding the skyline, or the hysterical woman who couldn't handle the pressure?" "I know about the Cayman accounts, Edward," she blurted out. It was a mistake. She saw it in his eyes immediately. He stepped closer, looming over her. The air dropped 10 degrees. You know nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. I made you, Megan, and today I'm going to unmake you. Mrs. Thorne? The voice came from behind her. It was Mr. Henderson, her public defender. He looked harried, holding a precarious stack of files, his tie slightly askew. Edward stepped back, the mask of the concerned ex-husband sliding back into place instantly. Mr. Henderson, good luck today. You're going to need it. Edward turned and walked back to his team, his stride confident, predatory. What did he say? Henderson asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. He threatened me, Megan whispered. Unless he threatened physical violence with a witness present, it doesn't matter, Henderson said, shuffling papers. Look, the judge is Harrison. He's tough on time wasters. We need to be quick. We concede the property claims, we ask for a modest alimony based on the duration of the marriage, and we pray he doesn't grant Edward's motion for legal fees. Concede? Megan looked at him, horrified. But he stole everything. The house, the investments. I helped him build that portfolio. Mrs. Thorne, Henderson sighed, looking her in the eye for the first time. We have no forensic accounting. We have no discovery. We have a waitress stub and a lease. We are bringing a knife to a nuclear war. I'm trying to keep you out of debt, not get you a payout. Megan felt the blood drain from her face. She was alone, truly, completely alone. All rise, the bailiff bellowed from inside the courtroom. Megan took a breath that rattled in her lungs. She walked through the double doors. Courtroom 4B was smaller than it looked on television, and infinitely colder. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. Judge Harrison sat behind the bench, a man with a face like carved granite and eyes that had seen too many lies to care about the truth anymore. Megan sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Mr. Henderson sat beside her, already checking his phone under the table. Across the aisle, Edward's team occupied the space like an invading army. 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals, leather briefcases, laptops open. Edward sat in the center, the aggrieved victim of a chaotic wife. The proceedings began with a dry recitation of facts. Marcus Sterling, Edward's lawyer, stood up. He didn't shout, he purred. He painted a picture of a marriage destroyed by Megan's increasing paranoia and financial illiteracy. Then, Edward took the stand. He was perfect. He was humble. He spoke about how he tried to get Megan help. He spoke about how much he loved her, even now, but how he couldn't let her reckless spending destroy his business partners. She would imagine accounts that didn't exist, Edward said, looking sadly at the judge. She would claim, I was hiding things. It was delusional. It broke my heart, Your Honor. Megan felt a scream building in her throat. It was so seamless. He was rewriting her reality in real time. Your turn, Mr. Henderson, the judge said, looking at his watch. Henderson stood up, looking defeated before he began. Mr. Thorne, isn't it true that your wife worked as a forensic auditor before you asked her to quit? She was a junior associate, Edward dismissed. She was stressed. I asked her to quit for her health. And isn't it true that your net worth increased by 400% in the year following her resignation? I work hard, Edward said, his jaw tightening. Next question. Henderson sat down. That was it. That was the cross-examination. Mrs. Thorne, take the stand, the judge ordered. Megan walked to the witness box. Her legs felt like lead. She swore to tell the truth. Sterling approached her like a wolf circling a wounded deer. Mrs. Thorne, do you have any proof of these hidden assets you claim my client possesses? I saw the emails before he locked me out, Megan stammered. The shell company in Nevis. Vector Holdings. Do you have these emails? No. He wiped the server. So, you have a memory. A memory from a woman who, by her own admission, was taking anti-anxiety medication at the time. Sterling smirked. Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time. I know what I saw. Megan's voice cracked. She looked at Edward. Tell them, Edward. Tell them about the transfer you made on Christmas Eve. Edward stood up at the plaintiff's table. This was a breach of protocol, but he couldn't help it. The mention of the specific date, Christmas Eve, hit a nerve. Stop lying, Megan, Edward shouted. His voice boomed off the wood paneling, startling the stenographer. The judge looked up, eyes narrowing. Sit down, Mr. Thorne. She's doing it again, Edward yelled, pointing a finger at her, his face flushing red. The mask was slipping. The charm was gone, replaced by the rage Megan knew so well. She spins these fantasies to humiliate me. You're a parasite, Megan. You never contributed a dime to my success. You were nothing but a burden I carried for 5 years. The courtroom fell silent. Edward was breathing hard, his hands gripping the table. Mr. Thorne, Judge Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. Another outburst like that, and I will hold you in contempt. Edward straightened his jacket, composing himself. Apologies, Your Honor. It's just the emotional toll. He looked at Megan with pure, unadulterated hatred. He had shouted yes, but he had also reasserted his dominance. He had made himself big, and her small. Megan looked down at her hands. Tears were hot in her eyes. It was over. The judge looked annoyed at her for provoking the successful man. Henderson was rubbing his temples. If there are no further witnesses, the judge said, reaching for his gavel, I am ready to rule on the motion for dismissal of spousal support. Megan closed her eyes. Please, she thought, someone, anyone. Clack boom. The sound wasn't the gavel, it was the double doors at the back of the courtroom slamming open against the walls. Every head in the courtroom turned. Standing in the doorway wasn't a random spectator, it was a phalanx. 4 men and 2 women entered. They were dressed not just in suits, but in armor. Italian wool, perfectly tailored, dark as midnight. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that made Edward's legal team look like amateurs playing dress-up. In the lead was a woman with silver hair cut into a sharp bob, holding a slim leather briefcase. Her eyes scanned the room and locked onto the judge. Who is this? Judge Harrison barked. This is a closed hearing. The silver-haired woman strode past the bar, ignoring the bailiff, who half-stepped forward to stop her. She placed a card on the judge's bench. Your Honor, she said, her voice clear, projecting to the back of the room without shouting. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am entering my appearance as lead counsel for Mrs. Megan Thorne. I apologize for the tardiness. We were delayed by the filing of new evidence. Megan stared. She had never seen this woman in her life. I have counsel, Megan whispered, looking at Henderson. Henderson looked at the woman, then at the card on the judge's bench. His eyes widened. He grabbed his stack of files. I withdraw, he said, almost too quickly. If Ms. Vance is taking over, I withdraw immediately. He practically sprinted away from the table. Objection. Sterling jumped up. You can't just switch counsel in the middle of a closing argument. We aren't at closing, Vance said, turning to face Sterling. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a microbe. And we have a motion to suspend proceedings based on the discovery of significant undisclosed assets and perjury committed by the plaintiff. Perjury? Edward laughed. It was a nervous barking sound. Who the hell are you? Vance ignored him. She turned to Megan. For the first time, the sharp expression softened. She walked over to the defendant's table and placed a hand on Megan's shoulder. It was a warm, solid weight. Megan, Vance said softly, you aren't alone anymore. Take a breath. I don't understand, Megan stammered. I can't afford you. I can't afford any of this. Your legal fees have been covered, Vance said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. In perpetuity. By whom? Edward demanded, stepping out from behind his table. Who is paying for this circus? The doors at the back of the room opened again. This time, they didn't bang. They opened slowly, held by one of the junior lawyers. A man walked in. He was in his late 50s, leaning heavily on a cane with a silver handle. He wore a long black overcoat, despite the heat of the building. His face was lined with chronic pain, but his eyes were piercingly blue and sharp as cut glass. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from confused to terrified. Edward's face went pale. He recognized the man. Everyone in Chicago who worked in finance or infrastructure recognized the man. It was Victor Kale, the billionaire recluse, the man who owned half the skyline Edward was trying to build on. Victor limped down the center aisle, the tap-tap-tap of his cane echoing like a metronome. He stopped at the railing. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at Edward. He looked at Megan. He nodded, a slow, respectful inclination of his head. Mr. Kale, Judge Harrison said, his voice losing its edge, replaced by a stunned deference. To what do we owe the honor? Victor turned his gaze to the judge. His voice was gravel and iron. I am here to observe, Your Honor. I have a vested interest in the welfare of my former employee. Employee? Edward sputtered. She never worked for you. She was a nobody. She was a junior auditor at a failing firm. Victor turned to Edward. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. She was the auditor who refused to sign off on the fraudulent concrete specs your subsidiary tried to sell my company 7 years ago, Victor said. She saved my reputation. She saved lives. And she lost her career because you forced her to bury it. Victor looked back at Megan. I pay my debts, Mrs. Thorne. It took me a long time to find you. I apologize for the delay. Victor gestured to Eleanor Vance. Ms. Vance, please proceed. Take him apart. Megan felt the tears finally spill over, but they weren't tears of despair. She looked at Edward. He was shrinking. He was sweating. He looked at the stack of documents Vance was holding, documents that undoubtedly contained the proof he thought he had destroyed. Megan sat up straighter. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of expensive wool and ozone that had just entered the room. Proceed, the judge said, leaning forward, suddenly very interested in the truth. Megan looked at Vance. I'm ready. Vance smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. Mr. Thorne, she said, turning to Edward, let's talk about Vector Holdings. The air in courtroom 4B had shifted. Before, it had been heavy with the stale predictability of a bureaucratic crushing. Now it crackled with the ozone scent of an approaching storm. Eleanor Vance did not pace. She stood rooted behind the defense table, her posture perfect, holding a single document as if it were a blade. Vector Holdings, Vance repeated. She looked at Edward Thorne, who was still standing at the plaintiff's table, his face a mask of forced confusion that was rapidly melting under the heat of the room. I have no idea what you're talking about, Edward stammered, looking at his own lawyer, Marcus Sterling. But Sterling was busy frantically reading the stack of documents Vance's paralegal had just dumped on his desk. Sterling's face had gone ashen. He knew. "Mr. Thorne, please retake the stand," Judge Harrison ordered. His voice was no longer bored. It was sharp, interested. Edward walked to the witness box. His confident stride was gone, replaced by a stiff, jerky gait. He sat down, adjusting his tie, clearing his throat. Vance approached the stand. She placed the document in front of him. "Mr. Thorne, do you recognize this IP address?" Edward squinted at the paper. "I'm a developer, not an IT guy. No. This IP address belongs to a server located in the basement of a residential property in Nevis," Vance said, her voice cool and melodic. "It is the registered address for a shell corporation named Vector Holdings. Interestingly, the initial deposit into this account, $2 million, was made on December 24th, the exact date your wife claimed you moved assets." "Coincidence," Edward snapped. "I have business all over the world." "Is it also a coincidence," Vance continued, pulling another sheet from her folder, "that the recovery email for this account is a Thorne Private as Secure Mail, an email address that you accessed from your phone in this very courthouse 20 minutes ago?" The silence in the room was absolute. Megan watched, mesmerized. She remembered that email. She had seen it pop up on his laptop screen once years ago before he slammed the lid shut and told her she was invading his privacy. Edward's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the judge. "Objection! Hacking! She's illegally accessing my private data." "We didn't hack anything, Mr. Thorne," Vance said, a small, wintry smile touching her lips. "You use the courthouse Wi-Fi. It's a public network. And when you accessed your offshore accounts to check if they were still secure upon seeing Mr. Cale enter the room, you pinged our monitoring software." That's preposterous," Edward sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Harrison interrupted, turning to Edward's lawyer, "are you aware of these assets? Because if you suborned perjury by allowing your client to sign a financial affidavit claiming poverty while sitting on millions, I will have your license suspended before lunch." Sterling stood up slowly. He looked at Edward with pure venom. "Your Honor, I was not informed of any such holdings. If these documents are authentic, I request a recess to confer with my client." "Denied," Harrison barked. "Ms. Vance, keep going." Vance nodded. "Mr. Thorne, Vector Holdings isn't just a savings account, is it? It's a funnel. You've been skimming from your investors for 3 years. You inflated construction costs on the Midtown project, Mr. Cale's project, and siphoned the difference into Vector." Megan gasped. The Midtown project? That was the crown jewel of Edward's career. It was the project he said demanded all his time, all his focus, the reason he was never home. "Lies," Edward shouted, standing up in the witness box. "She's making it up. Megan put her up to this. She's trying to ruin me." "Sit down," the judge roared. "The forensic trail is irrefutable, Your Honor," Vance said calmly. "We have bank transfers, contractor invoices falsified with Adobe Acrobat, poorly I might add, and communication logs. Mr. Thorne has approximately $12 million in undisclosed assets. He is asking this court to force his wife, who earns minimum wage, to pay his legal fees, while he hides a fortune stolen from the very man sitting in the back of this room." Every eye turned to Victor Kyle. The billionaire sat motionless in the back row, his hands resting on the head of his silver cane. He didn't look angry. He looked like a judge at an execution. He met Edward's frantic gaze and simply raised one eyebrow. It was a death sentence. Edward collapsed back into the chair. The fight went out of him all at once. He looked small. He looked like the fraud Megan had suspected he was, but had never dared to voice. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Harrison said, his voice dangerously low, I am freezing all assets belonging to Mr. Thorne, effective immediately. I am dismissing the plaintiff's motion for support. I am granting the defendant's counter-motion for full spousal support, retroactive to the date of separation. And I am referring this transcript to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal fraud charges. The gavel banged. It sounded like a thunderclap. Clack boom. Court is adjourned. Edward put his head in his hands. Megan just sat there, the vibration of the gavel still humming in her bones. It was over. But as she looked at the silver-haired lawyer packing her briefcase, and the billionaire watching her from the shadows, she knew it wasn't really over. It was just beginning. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was chaos. Reporters, sensing blood in the water, had gathered near the elevators. But Megan didn't have to face them. As soon as she stepped through the double doors, two large men in dark suits, part of Victor's phalanx, flanked her. They didn't touch her, but their presence created a bubble of impenetrable space. "This way, Mrs. Thorne," one of them murmured. They guided her away from the main exit, down a service corridor that smelled of cleaning solution. Eleanor Vance walked beside her, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. "You did well," Vance said, not looking at her. "You held it together." "I didn't do anything," Megan whispered, still in shock. "I just sat there." "That's the hardest part," Vance replied. "Most people scream. Screaming makes you look guilty. Silence makes you look like a victim." They reached a freight elevator. The doors opened, and inside stood Victor Kale. Megan hesitated. Up close, he was even more intimidating. The lines of pain on his face were deep, etched around his mouth and eyes. He looked frail and indestructible at the same time. "Come in, Megan," he said. His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. She stepped in. The doors slid shut, sealing them in a steel box. "Why?" she asked. It was the only word her brain could formulate. Victor leaned heavily on his cane, shifting his weight. "7 years ago, you were a junior auditor at a firm called Crestview. My company, Kale Industries, was contracting a subsidiary of Edward's firm for a bridge project. You found a discrepancy in the concrete density reports." Megan nodded slowly. The memory surfaced through the fog of trauma. They were cutting the cement with fly ash. Too much of it. It would have made the structure unstable after 5 years. "My engineers missed it," Victor said. "My lawyers missed it. You didn't. You flagged it. And when Edward found out, he pressured your boss to fire you. He told you it was a clerical error and that you were being hysterical. He made you doubt your own competence so he could secure the contract." Megan felt a chill run down her spine. "He told me I was crazy. He said I didn't understand the industry." "He lied," Victor said. "He married you to keep you quiet, Megan. As long as you were his wife, you couldn't testify against him. Spousal privilege. And he spent the next 5 years systematically destroying your confidence so you wouldn't realize you were the smartest person in the room." Megan leaned against the elevator wall, her legs trembling. "He married me as a liability shield?" "At first," Victor said. "Then I suspect he enjoyed the control. Men like Edward always do." The elevator pinged. They had reached the basement garage. A black SUV idled at the curb, engine purring. "I couldn't intervene earlier," Victor continued. "If I had come to you, he would have hidden the money deeper. I needed him to think he had won. I needed him to get arrogant enough to access the accounts in a public setting. We had to wait for the divorce hearing." He looked at her, his blue eyes softening slightly. "I am sorry you had to endure the last 2 years alone. But I owed you a life, Megan. That bridge, if it had been built, it would have collapsed last winter during the freeze. Hundreds of people would have died. Megan looked at her hands, the hands of a waitress, the hands of a woman who thought she was worthless. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Victor said, gesturing to the car, "we go to the St. Regis. You need a hot meal, a safe bed, and a new phone. Edward is desperate. A desperate man is a dangerous man. Until he is in custody, you are under my protection." "I can't pay you," Megan said, automatically. Victor laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Megan, you saved me $300 million and a lifetime of guilt. You have already paid." The suite at the St. Regis was larger than Megan's entire apartment building. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River, a bathroom filled with marble, and a bed that looked like a cloud. But Megan couldn't relax. She sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, staring at the door. It had been 4 hours since court adjourned. Vance had stayed for an hour, explaining the restraining order, the asset freeze, and the impending criminal investigation. Then she had left, leaving Megan with a burner phone and 2 security guards stationed in the hallway. Megan felt like an imposter. She looked down at her thrift store dress. It was stained with sweat. She wanted to shower, but she was afraid that if she took her eyes off the door, this dream would dissolve, and she would be back in the studio apartment with the radiator hissing. Her new phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She knew she shouldn't answer it. Vance had told her, "Only answer calls from me or Victor." But the curiosity was a physical itch. She pressed answer. "You think you've won?" The voice was ragged, slurring slightly. "Edward." He sounded drunk. "Edward," Megan said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You're not supposed to call me." "You bitch," he spat. "You set me up. You and that cripple. How long have you been screwing him, huh? Was that your plan all along? Play the victim, then run to Daddy Warbucks?" "I didn't know him, Edward. Unlike you, some people do things because they're decent." "Decent?" Edward laughed, a high, manic sound. "Victor Kale isn't decent. He's a shark. He eats people, Megan. You think he's helping you? He's using you. You're just a witness to him. Once he puts me in jail, he'll discard you just like I did." "You didn't discard me," Megan said, realizing the truth as she spoke it. "You tried to bury me because you were afraid of me." "Afraid of you?" Edward sneered. "You're a waitress." "I'm an auditor," Megan corrected him. "And I know where the bodies are buried. Vance showed me the files, Edward. I know about the concrete. I know about the bribes to the zoning commissioner." There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, breathing silence. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Edward whispered. "It's not just me. The money in Vector, it's not all mine. I was holding it for people. Bad people. If I go down, if that money is frozen, they're going to come for me. And if they can't find me, they'll come for you." "Then you better call the police," Megan said. "Megan, listen to me," Edward's voice cracked, shifting from rage to desperation. "I can't go to prison. I won't survive. Please, tell the judge you made a mistake. Tell him we're reconciling. I can fix this. We can run away. I have cash stash." Megan hung up. She stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. For the first time in 5 years, she held the power. There was a knock at the door. Megan jumped. "Who is it?" "Room service, ma'am. Mr. Kale ordered dinner." Megan walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A young woman in a uniform stood there with a cart. Megan opened the door. As the cart rolled in, the woman smiled. But as she passed Megan, she slipped a small, folded piece of paper into Megan's hand. "From the gentleman in the lobby," the waitress whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "He said he'd fire my mother if I didn't give it to you." The waitress hurried out, leaving the cart of food. Megan unfolded the note. It wasn't from Edward. The handwriting was elegant, sharp. The game isn't over, Mrs. Thorne. Edward is a pawn. If you want to survive the king, meet me downstairs, alone. Megan froze. Sterling? No, Sterling wouldn't risk this. She looked at the food. A silver cloche covered the plate. She lifted it. Underneath, resting on the fine china, was not a steak. It was a single, black chess piece. A queen. The phone rang again. It was Victor. Megan, his voice was urgent. Security just flagged a breach in the lobby. Stay in the room. Do not open the door for anyone. Too late, Megan whispered, staring at the Black Queen. They're already here. The silence in the suite was absolute, broken only by the frantic thudding of Megan's heart. Don't open the door, Victor had said, but the lock was already clicking, not the mechanical click of a key card, but the sharp, metallic snick of an electronic override tool. The handle turned slowly. Megan scanned the room. She was in a silk dress, barefoot. She had no weapon. The heavy marble lamp on the side table was bolted down. Hotel safety. She grabbed the only thing she could lift, a heavy crystal decanter of scotch from the minibar. The door swung open. It wasn't the police. It wasn't hotel security. Two men in maintenance uniforms stepped in. They wore caps pulled low, but in their hands were silenced pistols. They moved with efficient, terrifying silence. Check the bedroom, the lead man whispered. Megan was pressed behind the heavy velvet curtains of the floor-to-ceiling window, clutching the decanter. She watched through a slit in the fabric as the second man moved toward the bathroom. She held her breath. If she screamed, they would shoot. If she ran, they would shoot. The lead man paused by the table where the room service cart stood. He looked at the Black Queen chess piece sitting on the plate. He picked it up, chuckling softly. Looks like Sterling sent his regards. Sterling. The name hit Megan like a physical blow. Marcus Sterling, Edward's lawyer. The man who had purred insults at her in court wasn't just legal counsel. He was the architect of the threat. The second man came out of the bathroom. Clear, she must be hiding. Check the closet. If she's not there, check the balcony. Megan tightened her grip on the crystal bottle. They were turning toward the window. Suddenly, the hallway exploded with noise. Crash. The suite door, which the hitmen had left ajar, was kicked fully open, splintering the frame. Drop it! Kale security! 3 men in tactical gear flooded the room. No questions, no hesitation. The hitmen spun around, raising their weapons. The sound of gunfire was strangely muted, thwip-thwip, as Victor's team fired non-lethal beanbag rounds and tasers. The lead hitman convulsed and dropped to the floor. The second tried to dive behind the sofa, but was tackled by a man the size of a vending machine. "Secure!" the large man shouted. He ripped the mask off the hitman. He pressed an earpiece. "Boss, we got 'em. 2 hostiles. Standard cleanup." He turned to the room, scanning. "Mrs. Thorne?" Megan stepped out from behind the curtain. Her legs gave way, and she slid down the wall to the floor, the decanter clinking against the glass. The large man, his name tag read Cole, holstered his weapon and walked over to her. He didn't treat her like a damsel. He treated her like a package. "You hurt?" Megan shook her head, unable to speak. "Good. We're burning this location. Mr. Cale is moving you to the vault. We have 3 minutes before the police get here, and we don't want to answer their questions." He pulled her up. Megan looked at the table. The Black Queen had fallen to the floor in the scuffle. It lay on its side, rolling slightly. "Sterling," Megan whispered. It was Sterling. Cole looked at her, his expression grim. "We know. That's why we're leaving. Now." The vault was not a bank. It was a brutalist concrete mansion on the outskirts of Chicago, surrounded by 10 acres of forest and a 12-foot electric fence. Megan sat in a library that smelled of old paper and gun oil. Victor Kahl sat opposite her, his leg propped up on an ottoman. He looked older tonight. The rescue had cost him energy he didn't have. "Marcus Sterling," Victor said, pouring 2 glasses of water. "Harvard Law, Rhodes Scholar, and for the last 10 years, the primary money launderer for the Petrov crime syndicate." Megan took the water with shaking hands. "Edward's lawyer is a mobster." "Edward was a useful idiot," Victor corrected. "Sterling needed a legitimate real estate developer to wash the Petrov money through construction projects. High costs, cash payments to contractors, confusing paper trails. Edward was perfect, greedy, ambitious, and not smart enough to ask questions." "But why try to kill me?" Megan asked. "The court case is over. I won." "Because of what you took," Victor said. He pointed to the stack of files Vance had seized from Edward's office during the asset freeze. "When we seized Edward's servers, we didn't just get his bank accounts. We got the master file." Victor slid a hard drive across the mahogany table. "This drive contains the transaction history for every dirty dollar Sterling has washed in the last decade. Edward was supposed to destroy it. He didn't." "Why not?" "Insurance," Megan realized aloud. Her auditor's brain was waking up, overriding the fear. Edward kept it as leverage in case Sterling ever tried to cut him out. "Exactly," Victor nodded. "But now you have it, and Sterling knows that if you, a forensic auditor, look at that data, you won't just see numbers. You'll see the map. You can trace the money back to the Petrovs, to the politicians they bribed, to Sterling himself." Megan looked at the drive. It was small, black, innocuous. It was a bomb that could level a city. "They will never stop coming for you," Victor said softly. "Not while this drive exists, and not while you can testify to its contents." "So, I'm dead," Megan said flatly. "That's what you're saying." "No," Victor leaned forward, his blue eyes blazing. "I'm saying we have a choice. We can hand this to the FBI. They'll put you in witness protection. You'll move to Nebraska, change your name to Brenda, and work at a diner for the rest of your life. You'll be safe, but you'll be hiding." He paused. "Or," Megan asked, "or you do what you were born to do. You open that drive. You find the one thing the FBI will take 6 months to find. You find the money they haven't washed yet. The liquidity." "Why?" "Because if we freeze their operating capital," Victor smiled, a shark-like grin, "they can't pay their soldiers. They can't pay their lawyers. The organization eats itself. We don't just survive, Megan. We bankrupt them." Megan looked at the drive. She thought about the last 2 years. The radiator hissing in the empty apartment. Edward's laugh when he told her she was worthless. Sterling's smirk in the courtroom. She reached out and took the drive. "I'm going to need coffee," she said. "A lot of it." For the next 48 hours, Megan didn't sleep. She turned the library into a war room. Charts covered the walls. Strings of red yarn connected shell companies in Panama to construction firms in Chicago. Victor checked on her periodically, bringing food she didn't eat, and coffee she drank like water. Cole stood guard at the door, watching her with a growing respect. Megan was in the zone. This was her world. The numbers spoke to her. They sang a song of greed. Edward had been sloppy, but Sterling was a genius. The layering was complex. Triple-blind trusts, crypto tumblers, fake invoices for materials that didn't exist. But every system has a flaw. It was 4:01 a.m. on the second day when Megan found it. "Victor," she croaked. Her voice was hoarse. Victor hurried in, leaning on his cane. "What is it?" "Look at this." She pointed to a column of recurring transactions. Every month, on the 15th, Sterling moves 5% of the gross intake to a holding company called Aurelius. "Aurelius?" Victor frowned. "I've never heard of it. Is it the boss's cut?" "That's what it looks like," Megan said, her eyes feverish. "But look at the routing number. It's not offshore, it's domestic," she typed furiously. "I traced the EIN. Aurelius isn't a bank account, it's a trust. A charitable trust." "A charity?" "For the preservation of classical arts," Megan read. "Registered in New York." She pulled up the board of directors for the charity. There, listed as the treasurer, was a name: Julian Sterling. "Marcus Sterling's brother?" Victor asked. "His son," Megan corrected. "He's 18, a student at Juilliard." Megan spun around in her chair. "Sterling isn't sending the money to the Petrovs. He's skimming. He's stealing from the mob to build a nest egg for his son." Victor stared at the screen. The implications hit him instantly. If the Petrovs find out their lawyer is stealing 5% of their revenue, they kill him, Megan finished. They kill him, and the whole operation collapses into infighting. "We don't need the FBI," Victor whispered. "We just need to send a bank statement to the Petrovs." "No," Megan said, standing up. She felt a surge of power she hadn't felt in years. "If we send it to the Petrovs, they just kill Sterling and disappear. We need to bring them all down." "What do you propose?" "We trigger a panic," Megan said. "I can use Edward's credentials, which I memorized before he locked me out, to access the Aurelius account. I can't withdraw the money, but I can flag it. I can trigger an IRS audit on that specific trust." "That will alert Sterling," Victor warned. "Exactly," Megan smiled. "Sterling will panic. He'll try to move the money. When he moves it, the Petrovs will see the movement. They'll think he's running. They'll converge on him." "And where will Sterling go when he runs?" Victor asked. Megan pointed to a location on the map she had drawn. "He owns a private airfield in Gary, Indiana. It's in the files. If he runs, he goes there." "So we have a location," Victor said, "and we have the bait." "We force them into a bottleneck," Megan said. "We let the Petrovs chase Sterling, and we have the FBI waiting for all of them at the airfield." Victor looked at her. The broken woman from the courtroom was gone. In her place was a strategist. "It's dangerous," Victor said. "If Sterling realizes it's you doing this—" "He already tried to kill me, Victor," Megan said. "I'm done hiding. Let's burn them down." Megan has found the smoking gun. Sterling isn't just a lawyer, he's a thief, stealing from the Russian mob. Now, Megan and Victor are about to execute a plan to turn the wolves against each other. But triggering a mob war is dangerous business. Can Megan execute the digital trap before Sterling traces the hack back to the safe house? If you are loving this transformation from victim to mastermind, hit like and subscribe. You won't believe the showdown in the final chapters. Comment checkmate if you're rooting for Megan.